now a weekly thing, and we've been having a lot of fun with this. We record these, we put them on our new YouTube channel. It's going to be great. I'm very happy to have Jack here because like he is amazing. And what I do want to say, like, this is our first non-chapter one, so I want to speak a little bit as to like what's going to be happening. We're going to have four characters, and what's been going on in essence, without giving away too much, is like they're in a mansion and they're looking for a map. We have Sydney is a young warrior, like maybe 18 to 21 years old. We have that's her name. The character is she. She's like maybe 21 to 25-ish. She's a thief that's been actually hired by the villain to get Prince Alfric back to the villain who's now in control of the capital city. Alfric is a 10-year-old fire mage. He's the prince that I referenced, and there is Riven. Riven's middle-aged. He's like maybe 38 to 44-ish. He's like an ex-druid, though, like, the powers remain. So they're in this location. They're looking for a map. The Matner belongs to Count Malachi, who is kind of like a secondary antagonist. Like we've referred to him, prior to this. So like that's just to kind of set a stage, and we will be starting momentarily. Like, I just want to also mention that at the end, if anybody has questions, like please, like if any come to your mind, please jot them down. I'll answer any of them after Jack is done narrating. I'll be very happy to. Also, if anybody wants to speak, I'll be very happy to have you guys speak as well. With that, without further ado, go ahead, Jack.
Alrighty then. Welcome into Gemcast Live, Episode 3. We will begin. The architect left no doubt where the master bedroom lay. At the end of the east wing, not far from the plundered table, stood a pair of doors that commanded reverence. They towered above them, reaching nearly to the ceiling, their dark mahogany surface gleaming with generations of careful polish and pride. Intricate carvings adorned their faces, coiling vines that seemed to shift in the wavering torchlight, while the red adder of the House Malachi wound its way through the design like a signature written in living wood. The handles were fashioned into the shape of striking snakes, their plated bodies forming the grip, while their heads curved outward, fangs eternally bared. Between them, the keyhole sat within the mouth of a larger serpent's head that emerged from the wood itself, its eyes set with small garnets that caught like drops of frozen blood. Even the frame spoke of power and precision. Ornately carved columns flanked the doors, their capitals decorated with scenes from House Malachi's storied history. The marble beneath the doors had been worn slightly by centuries of purposeful steps, each a groove, a testament to the generations of nobles who had crossed this threshold to sleep, scheme, and rule. Sidney placed his hand on a scaled door handle. Shockingly, it turned. The door was open. Strange, Sidney thought. Whatever else could be said about Count Malachi, he must have treated his men well. They would fight hard for him. The door opened without a sound, as though reluctant to disturb its master's slumber. The bedchamber breathed opulence and authority. Moonlight streamed through tall windows that opened onto a private balcony. where Count Malachi could stand and witness his domain. From atop the hill where the manor sat, Zekermalinek's spread before it like a dark tapestry, soon with hundreds of flickering lights. A massive, canopied bed dominated one wall, its heavy velvet drapes gathered in thick folds, then secured with golden cords. The fabric bore the red adder of House Malachi, embroidered in repeating patterns that seemed to writhe in the torchlight. The bed stood like a throne for sleep, suggesting that even in rest, the Count maintained his regal bearing. The fireplace commanded the opposite wall, its mantels carved from a single piece of black marble shot through with veins of deep red, a fire burning low within. Here, even the flames prostrated themselves. Above, it hung a portrait of a man who was likely the Count's father. Sharp features and proud bearing, though his hair had gone to gray. Near the fireplace stood the cabinet they sought, its wood matching the darkness of the bedroom doors. Like everything else in the chamber, it bore the serpentine motif of House Malachi. Their carved bodies coiled protectively around the lock. She held her breath as she crept toward the cabinet, timing her footfalls with the exhalations of the sleeping Count. In her hand, she held the key, its brass skin glinting in the faint glow at the fireplace. And keeping her hand perfectly still, she eased the key into the hole, careful not to allow the slightest scrape. The key slid home, settled into place, and refused to turn. Something in her chest contracted, though her face remained perfectly composed. This ending wasn't written in any story she knew, wasn't part of how the world worked. She wormed the key with infinite patience, feeling for any hint of movement, any suggestion that the lock might cooperate. But the mechanism remained as unyielding as a noble pride. The others waited in the doorway, Riven with a blank look on his face, Elfric with a hint of worry, Sidney apprehensively dividing his attention between her efforts and the hallway beyond, as if trying to decide which direction disaster might come from first. Even Elfric's torch leaned into the chamber, as though agog in anticipation. She exulted sharply through her nose and worked the key back and forth with mounting frustration, each attempt more futile than the last. She cursed under her breath, barely a sound, finally removing the key and setting it on a small table with a faint clink, its rejection carrying more weight than the metal itself. She reached for her pick. Tried and true, it emerged from its hiding place, dull in the darkness as though still half asleep. She carefully slipped it into the lock, as she had done countless times before. The pick wiggled within, like a wand, seeking the magic that would make the cabinet submit. Sidney shifted in the doorway. His new chain shirt clinking faintly as he glanced over his shoulder again. Elfric clutched the torch tighter, his knuckles white as the flame wavered. Riven stood further back, his expression inscrutable. The pick met resistance. She adjusted. It caught. She slowly applied more pressure. Snap. The sound was delicate, almost polite, but in the heavy silence it might as well have been a thunderclap. She froze, staring down at the broken pick in her hand, as if it had betrayed her. Elfric's sharp intake of breath filled the chamber as the broken fragment rattled free and fell inside the lock. Then movement. Barely a murmur at first. The Count's massive canopy rippled like dark water as he stirred within his crimson cocoon. Time cracking, like fractured ice at the brink of an avalanche. A cough issued forth from the canopy. Then came the faint rustle of movement. The restless shifting of a man woken from sleep, his body urging him toward the bedpan. Looking around, she saw it sitting in a corner under the bed, as though ashamed. Ridiculously, the thought of simply handing it to a groggy Count, as he began to part the drapes, ran through her mind. Lacking any better plan, she swiftly tiptoed towards the ostracized item. As though reading her mind, Riven moved, staff in hand. He quietly crossed the room. He looked down at the small table, the key gleaming forlornly in its failure. The velvet folds of the canopy shifted as the Count's hand pawned blindly for the opening. She lifted the ceramic bedpan, its tin-glazed surface depicting an artfully rendered harvest scene, ensuring appropriate presentation for the Count's submission. The odor rose like an acrid ghost as the velvet stirred its earlier contents. She stood frozen between absurdity and necessity as the Count's hand emerged from the drapes. In his sleep-addled state, he accepted the offering without question, muscle memory guiding his actions. The sound of liquid hitting the ceramic filled the chamber as the Count attended to his body's demands. Then his eyes found focused. She watched understanding dawn on his face. First the realization that she was not his chambermaid, then the sight of Riven standing conspicuously by his desk. His eyes widened, sleep falling away. "Guards!" The word erupted from him, sharp and commanding, even in his state of partial undress. The bedpan shattered against his skull, fragments of the harvest scene scattering across the sheets, along with the droplets of something less pastoral. The Count collapsed sideways with a garbled cry, tangling himself as he clawed for purchase, blood trickling from his split scalp. Wood splintered on impact, the force of Riven's strike reverberating through the room. As the table collapsed into shards, it revealed the maps hidden beneath, their edges curling slightly, as though they too sought to shrink from the Count's simmering fury. Riven's staff shifted in his hands, stone softening, back to smooth wood. Stooping down, he quickly sifted through the ejected contents, unable to discern which was which. He threw the entire collection into the voluminous pockets of his robes. With that, he headed for the door. With one last glance at the chaos of the canopy, he turned to Sydney and said, "We'd best be on our way." Taking Elfric's by the hand, Riven bounded towards the far end of the corridor, the stolen maps rustling in his pockets. Sydney glanced at she, prodding her with his gaze, her presence of mind returning. She hustled over to the double doors. The metallic hiss of Sydney's sword being drawn cut through the heavy air, leading their charge toward escape from this den of serpents. Each door they passed seemed a threat in waiting. Every closed frame a potential floodgate ready to burst forth with guards. They caught up with Riven and Alfric at the balcony. A quick survey of the rooms revealed no sign of response to the Count's distress. They descended the carpeted staircase swiftly, hearts hammering as their thoughts raced ahead, anticipating each twist and turn. As they reached the marbled crossroads, the hallway that they had come from left nothing to the imagination. Several guards rushed towards them, clad in breastplate over studded leather, carrying drawn swords and angry torches. They retreated toward the main exit. The painted ancestors and noble busts lining the walls seemed more alive now, their faces glinting with dark triumph. Flames writhed in their sconces like serpents' tongues, casting slithering shadows that made the stone features swift with malevolent enthusiasm. Eyes followed them, unblinking, eager to witness another bloody victory for House Malachi. As they approached the tall, elaborate double doors, their hearts sank as they swung open with a booming finality, its threshold fully of armored figures blocking their exit. Both groups approached the party slowly, like a pair of pincers. Alderin presided over the scene, as though sitting in a gladiatorial judgment. Zephyra appeared, almost completely hidden behind a passing cloud, as if afraid to look. As the enemy advanced, their boots struck a steady rhythm against the marble floor, like drums before an execution. She melted into the shadows between hallways, her presence dissolving into darkness like ink in water. Sydney clasped his sword with both hands, its silvered edge catching torchlight like a sliver of captured moon. Beside him, Riven placed himself before Elfric, whose torch cast shadows that seemed to multiply their enemies. Then the shadows began to dance. She emerged behind the first guard like a nightmare given form, her blade opening his throat before he could cry out. His companions turned at the wet gurgle, but she was already gone, flowing through the darkness between torch pools like a deadly current. Another fell, then another, their deaths marked only by the soft thud of bodies meeting marble. Count Malachi appeared on the balcony, resplendent in silk night clothes, still stained with blood and urine. A distant but aggravated expression slowly dawned as he witnessed the battle unfold. Sidney met the first wave with ruthless efficiency. Where the opponents relied on brute force, he countered with precision, a style honed in noble courtyards now wielded in desperate corridors. His blade found gaps in armor and turned aside clumsy strikes. Centuries fell to his expertise before they fully understood the threat he posed. A swordsman pressed Riven's back. His strikes, crude but effective. Riven's stony staff caught each blow, but his feet betrayed his fatigue as he stumbled. The man raised his blade for a killing stroke, and suddenly went rigid. She's dagger protruding from the base of his skull. Their eyes met for a heartbeat, carrying something that might have been respect, before she tumbled back into the shadows. Riven recovered quickly, his staff spinning with deceptive speed. Another figure charged, sword raised high. Riven swept low, hooking his legs out from under him. As the man fell, Riven brought the quarterstaff down on his face with stone-cold decisiveness. The violence spread like ripples in a dark pool. Guards fell to unseen strikes, their confusion turning to terror as death moved among them. Sidney's blade caught the torchlight as he parried a thrust, then spun to slash another guard's side. She seemed to appear and disappear like a vengeful spirit, each emergence marked by another's body, joining those on the floor. One man managed to grab Alfric, pressing steel to the boy's throat. His triumph lasted only moments before she materialized behind him, her blade opening his throat as the boy looked on. Even as he fell, another approached through the chaos, his sword already slicing through Alfric's unprotected back. A wild swing knocked a torch from its sconce. As it twirled through the air, Alfric's eyes fixed upon it. The flame seemed to pause in its descent, hanging suspended for a breath, before leaping like a frothing beast onto the approaching swordsman, just as the wooden handle clattered on the ground. The man's screams echoed through the hall as the fire consumed him, his fellows backing away in horror. The Count's face twisted with fury as he watched his men fall to steel and shadow. He pointed a weapon, a handheld crossbow, its groove not much bigger than a single bolt. It held steady, despite his rage and recent injuries. Sidney saw the crossbow. He opened his mouth to shout a warning, but his voice was lost in the chaos as he parried another guard's thrust. She emerged from the darkness to plant a dagger in an enemy's kidney, her movement carrying her directly into Malachi's sights. The bolt took her in the shoulder, just as she struck. The impact spinning her half around. She staggered, but didn't fall, her blade continuing its deadly work, even as blood darkened her leather. The remaining men broke formation, their discipline shattering. Her movements remained fluid, despite the wound, each strike precise and purposeful, as though the pain only sharpened her deadly focus. The last guard fell to Sidney's blade, his technique still perfect, even in the midst of the slaughter. As silence settled over the carnage, she turned toward the balcony, her smile visible even in the dim light. Blood ran down her arm, but her posture remained proud. She blew a kiss to the Count before backing through the great doors into the night beyond. The others followed, leaving Malachi among his fellow men, shy one stack of maps. End of chapter.
All right. All right. Thanks, man. That was awesome. Thanks for reading it. Like that sounded professional. Like it was amazing.
Thank you, thank you.
All right. If anybody's got any questions they want to ask, I'll be happy to answer them. Like again, another like awesome, like, Gemcast, like Jack was awesome. I was just super happy to have him do the chapter. Like, like it was just amazing. Let's have it like a professional person, reading my story.
Well, one of the things I wanted to ask is, obviously this isn't the first chapter of your story, and being that we're hopping into the action, right? Um, what inspires or creates the impetus for why she is she? Is it because she's an unnamed figure, or is it because she's a force of nature, or is it actually just her name?
Okay, so it's not her name. Her name is so when I do chapters, I do like Royal Road chapters. So I take like one actual chapter. Like this one would have been like I think four Royal Road chapters would have probably been like one actual chapter. So in this Count Malachi Manor actually is a flashback where we do get her name. It's not like she is not her name, but like when she first appears, what we in an early chapter, I think it's like chapter 5 or 6, it's entitled She in the story. She's doing a she's actually robbing another one of this guy's buildings, actually, ironically. And it's referred to that the people, like the common people in the city where she does her thing, like only refer to her as she, all because like, basically the way it is, like they just know that she is like a thief and she does pretty much whatever she wants to at night as far as these escapades of her, and then they know she's female, so they refer to her as like she. So that's like one reason. That's kind of like how that took. There's also reasons in the story. She's actually a no. She used to be a noblewoman, and she doesn't like have access to like her name as far as like the power it used to hold. So that's part of it. And to be honest, like I kind of play between her and Sydney, there are elements of gender nonconformance that I weave into the story, like and that's also like the reason her name is the way it is. Like they have a chapter where they talk on it, and it's actually kind of like, even though she has more masculine traits that like an average woman would, it can I wanted to write it in a way that like if somebody's just not interested in those themes, they could just simply say, okay, strong medieval woman who doesn't want to be typecast. Same thing with Sydney. Sydney's like got some like more androgynous things about him, but like it doesn't beat anybody over the head. And there's actually a romance arc. There's a heterosexual romance arc with both of them. So it's kind of like, you know, like I kind of comment on it. I guess I was saying that like, like whoever you are, there's room for you. Like you don't have to fit inside of a label just because You may be a certain way, no matter what that way is. Like, you don't have to force yourself into expectations. Just be yourself.
That's fair. So basically, her pronouns are I'm her, and she basically is that dominant battle force that they don't even want to name because she's like Voldemort power in that kind of sense. Is that fair to say that she has that kind of presence that just demands respect based on the force that she just brings when she's noticed? Is that kind of the
I
overall?
would I would say with regards to the pronoun, she finds it irritating. But there's also a comment in which she makes like we don't get to choose what other people call us, but we don't have to be defined by what labels they give us. She just words it differently. That's kind of her attitude with the pronoun. But like as far as her like combat proficiency, like I would say if this was like a lit RPG or like a game, like at this moment of the story that you just read, she would be a couple of levels higher than everybody else.
Gotcha.
That's kind of how I look at it. You know what I'm saying? Like she's been hired by the villain. That arc starts in her first chapter. Within a couple of her chapters, she gets hired by the villain. She kind of like actually finagles her way into that. And so by the time she meets these guys, and to also like weave in one of the questions, is she a main character or does she only appear a few times? Lucia asked. I have like an ensemble group, so everybody who appeared in this chapter I consider a main character. I would say the story is mainly about Alfric and the things happening to him, but he is not necessarily the main character, especially at this stage of the novel, being that he's a child and he's developing. So he is a main character, but I would say the story like narration, a lot of it goes from like Sydney's perspective, and like she gets part Riven, like sometimes Alfric, and we kind of move stories. I'll be honest, like the chapters I'm writing right now, there's another character coming by chapter 40, 41, 42. Like there's like yet another. Yeah, it's going to be an ensemble story.
So that's fair. Bert asked the question, "What inspired you to write this? Like, what was the idea
So
that happened first?"
okay, so the world definitely is the result of lots of like D&D and Pathfinder version 1 like world building. I that I've been doing for years just for fun, having to do with like, playing the game, but also just on like just on free time. I just like to build it. The story parts of it is campaigns that I ran as a DM in Pathfinder. And like we had run the idea that there's a prince that's been like a coup happened and he's a fire mage and we're looking for the four elemental artifacts that can like very much enhanced magic. Like that whole idea was ran before, but a lot of these other characters just kind of materialized. Like Sydney, the Sydney archetype was played, just not like necessarily with all of his characteristics. She was supposed to be a throw-in. Interestingly, I just thought like, hey, they need a rogue. Let me like design this character, and she's kind of like become like a force onto herself. Like if you look at my chapter analytics, all things being equal, she's probably the most popular character. Um, yeah, like same thing with Riven. Like he kind of just naturally came to be writing the story, but it was a reaction to the campaigns, and it's also I would say there's inspiration from Lord of the Rings. I would say there's inspiration from Game of Thrones. Those are definitely big. I love the movie Willow. So like when I kind of like look at fantasy in general, in my world in general, I would say like those three things kind of inform it a lot. And there was a lot of like turn-based RPG games being played when I was a child, whether it's like the Ultima series or later on a little bit of Final Fantasy. So yeah, D&D. There's definitely a lot of D&D like type influence, like without actually having classes named or levels or anything like that. The idea of it, that type of world, like definitely played a role.
All right. Well, we're getting some more questions coming in. I do want to ask one question. There was one word that I was nervous as heck to try to go off. It was the proper noun earlier in the story. I'm scrolling back to it right now. Did
City
I
name?
did I butcher it or not? It was
No, you got it. You got it in the ballpark, and it's my fault because I really should have checked it. It's Zaker Malinix,
Zacher
but like
Malinix. Okay,
you
yeah.
almost got it though. Like that was pretty cool. Yeah, I have some weird city names.
No, it's okay. It's okay. When it comes to these, when it comes to obviously fantasy stories or whatnot, I need to check a lot more of the proper nouns beforehand. But it's difficult to scan all of those, right? Yeah. If I wanted to read your audiobook, Bert, I honestly, Bert, I wouldn't feel right to charge you because I do make mistakes and I'd have to, obviously pause and redo things. But yeah, we can talk about that differently. But yeah, I can make that work for you. And obviously we can talk tone and distinction because I know your cyberpunk story would be one that you'd want me to make sure I have more of a rasp on there probably and more darker and drearier than I probably read this one because of the action sequences. But yeah, thank you. I'm glad I didn't butcher your proper nouns there, Aiden. Because I was nervous as heck. I didn't know it until I came upon that word, and I was just like, oh snap, here we go. Let's try it out. It's like reading the Old Testament again, where you're just like, all right, what is Arpakashad? Because
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So yeah, I'll give them chance if they have any other if anybody else has got a question. But like yeah, I mean, I kind of like feel what everybody else feels with regard to the quality that we get on these Gemcasts with you doing the narration. It's just like, like we're whoever it is, like we're gonna be in for a treat because like it's kind of like the story gets this vehicle of like being able to be shown. That's like people come in if they haven't done this before, they're like, oh, like this is something different. So like yeah, I think we're really lucky.
Well, I appreciate that. Because some days, obviously, voice is something that is not stagnant, right? We all of you guys know in your day to day life whether you're hyped up, whether you're tired, whether you've gotten proper water or proper rest, your voice will change and reflect your existence, right? So I'm always a little nervous sometimes whether or not I'm actually able to give you a proper voice that day. And today was one of them that I was a little nervous about, believe it or not. So I really do hope it came through well. And if you guys didn't, I apologize. This was also my first time reading in this font, and I gotta tell you guys, there are some fonts that are a little easier for me to catch, and there are some where my I start asking myself whether I'm a little dyslexic or not. But I promise that I'm trying my best, so I appreciate it, guys. I appreciate the love that I get from you guys. I really do.
I'm sorry. I should have,
No, no, no. It's
yeah, that's
okay. It's
definitely my
okay.
fault. As far as I should have probably checked in earlier because the font thing has come up at least one time way back. So I was aware that it's not everybody's favorite. I just kind of like writing in it because it is somewhat readable at least compared to some other quote fancy ones. But it does like when I write, it does give me that vibe. It's like, oh, it's like a little bit like that old school fantasy without like, being completely off the wall,
Oh, and that's a good thing.
unreadable.
Yeah, and that's a good thing. Honestly, what I mean really is just there are, believe it or not, I don't know if you guys know this, but there are certain fonts that are actually designed to work better for anyone that has any variants of dyslexia to not get tongue tied or mind gapped. And so I don't know off the top of my head what those are, but I know like for instance, Calambry body, um, Arial regular. Those are generally ones that are less likely to catch on a reader or a voice reader or whatnot. But that's beside the fact. I'm just saying that sometimes I'm a little nervous that I'm gonna like, oh no, I really hope that I don't get scared halfway through.
To answer hopeless chloromantics comment question, like where this is I don't know like off the top of my head, but chapter this is I think we're in the 20s, and so like by the time we've gotten to here, like the way I write, like I had a lot of beta readers that were like that would tell me like this is like going to potentially be a disaster because of like kind of the POV. It's not just like omniscient in the sense that like people would love to call this head hopping, but like not only do I do like go from character to character, I try to make it as seamless as I can, but I also lean into the character And this because as I go along, this becomes more pronounced. Like we literally like as we zoom on the character, like the kind of voice of the narrator changes, like as far as words they would use, kind of thinking patterns to kind of lean into the character. And this definitely happens with like Riven. We didn't get a lot of Riven this chapter, but like it becomes like a little bit more druidic. Like we had a lot of Sydney, so this is like what you guys got was a lot of Sydney. Like he's like more educated, like a little bit more with like the vocabulary, like more militaristic. I wanted to keep it with him because we have a lot of like observation of scenery from like a tactical perspective. So I wanted to keep it there. Alfric would be a little simpler, and she is like, she's going to be a little snarkier. She's going to be like a little bit more down to earth, but yeah. So I don't have to rely on as much dialogue, especially in like a place where like they can't do a lot of talking because they'll just draw attention to themselves because I can have the narrator like lean into their various because they've obviously spoken before this. So you do get a lot of that, especially in the downtime chapters. And so like I can rely on the narrator leaning into the various characters' mindsets. And it works. I mean, like, I don't know, there's some like ratings that aren't as high. So like there's definitely people that don't like it. But nah, the readers that I do have, they really like it. They comment, they've been engaging in the story, and I'm very appreciative.
So while we're getting more questions in, um, basically from the four mainies that I really got a chance to experience here in this chapter, the way I see it, the party makeup, we have she, who is probably 3 to 4 levels ahead. I'm thinking in terms of Fire Emblem reference, so that's where I reference things. I don't reference things in D&D. I reference it in Fire Emblem. So she's basically the experience hog, the one who's just way too far ahead right now as far as prowess. And then you have kind of Sydney, who is slightly above average in comparison, and it smells like Riven is the middle of the road person, while Alfric is a little bit of a liability right now. Is that correct, or am I wrong?
I would say I'm trying to think of like this chapter. I think this chapter it would be like more or less like not far from the truth. Alfric speeds up a good deal shortly. I'm trying to think of the order of the chapters. Like even before this adventure, there was another one prior where he, for the first time, like uses magic by choice, knowing what he's doing in a combat situation, and it's because of him they survive. So like that's already been established. But he's still also 10, and you know what I'm saying? And like there's adults here, and like they're kind of like gonna be more like, protective, and he's gonna have like, kind of like, but however it is starting to escalate. I just wrote a chapter today where like, where like he was pretty instrumental offensively. So like yeah, that kind of gets its momentum. I would say the other ones, um, they catch up and they get kind of evened out. Riven has his specialties. Like Riven, there's a scene earlier in this chapter or the one before where like it's actually like he comments on like he would want to be able to like do like a perception to be able to like tell what's going on, and if they were in nature he can tell from just being there like what's going on, kind of like almost like a telepathy with nature type thing. He can't do it in a manner like with constructed stone, and like everything is like fake and like manufactured, and so like he's totally out of his element. He's an old guy with a staff who could turn it to stone. He's got some really cool magic that happens throughout though. And Sydney is a very adept swordsman. He's very loyal, to a fault probably. Like like yeah, he's good at what he does.
Respect, respect. Do we have any other questions out there in this world? We would love to be able to answer anything. We have a question from
No,
Lucia.
Sydney. Sydney's not a kid. Sydney's like a young man. I would say Sydney's like I haven't like really given them ages. I would say he's like probably 18 to 21. He's like in that age, maybe 22-ish. I would say she is probably like 3 or 4 years older. Riven is middle aged. He would be like high 30s to like mid 40s. And Alfric's the kid. Alfric is 10. And there's another younger protagonist that I've put in, but that's like the 40s or so. So like yeah, somebody had actually mentioned that like they think kids are hard to write, and I'm like, I don't find them hard to write. Like I should like lean into this, but like it was gonna be part of the story anyway. But like yeah, Sydney is probably early 20s.
You mentioned kids are hard to write, and I actually do agree with that. That kids are hard to write if you're forgetting that you're not a kid. You know, I'm sure many of you guys have this too when you write underage or children characters that are in that preteen adolescence kind of era where the question is how smart do you make them? Because not every damn child you read about can be a genius, you know, and yet we as 30, 20, 40, 50-year-old writers can easily accidentally put our life experience and thought process and perception onto a kid character, which is I know I didn't think that way. I don't the way I think now is not the way I thought when I was 10. I'm sure there are kids who might think the way that I do now as a you know a 34-year-old man, but I'm sure for you guys all, yeah, Ash Ketchum with a 10-year-old with 30 years of experience playing Pokemon. Well, yeah, well Ash Ketchum is the ideal employee for any company. Okay, that's the kid that everyone wants for their company. He's getting the second interview. But you get what I'm saying. That's something that I think
Yeah.
is I agree with that children is hard to write. So how are you able to pull back and maintain that air of innocence, that air of I don't want to say weaker thought, but I want to say weaker thought.
I think it's just like something I'm good at. Like I'm able to tune in to how it is that I thought. I've had jobs where I have worked with kids. Like I've been a camp counselor, like I was actually gonna be a teacher, but just like life went differently. So it's some of that, and like I think I'm just able to tune in to like kind of like how my mind worked at those times. Like maybe it's also like, like I had some trauma down there, so like maybe I'm just attached to it. But like yeah, I'm able to kind of get into that. And like when it comes to like Alfric, for example, and the same thing's going to happen with Kites, who's my next child protagonist down the line. They like Alfric, for example, I'm able to show his competency through the training that he has access to. Like for example, like I referenced that like he does some magical things in like a prior chapter. Well, before that, chapters before, he sits down with Riven and who explains to him like that chapter is the gift, like how the magic system basically works. And so like before that, like the only thing he really did for the most part is he like had a reaction by accident during combat where fire like responded to him being threatened. Like, he had no idea what the heck he's doing. So like since then, after the mentorship, he's able to put it to use. And so a lot of times, like when Alfric does have knowledge that would probably exceed to what a typical 10-year-old can do, like I've demonstrated why it is he has that. Or like, or the next character I'm going to bring in, like he's a street kid with a lot of competency with surviving on the streets. Like that's what he knows and that's his mindset, and he's going to be good at those things. But like the other stuff, you know what I'm saying? Like I try to make it as realistic as possible, because like this is like one of those like low magic, low fantasy, high fantasy stories. Like the while there is magic, like there like it's I try to keep it restrained.
And what you guys are talking about when it comes to kids in the chat are absolutely correct, you know, and it's kind of the question mark of being able to experience something also and also blocking it out because of not being able to process it beyond the abstract. And I guess that's one of the things that I think about when I think about kids is the opportunity for a lack of abstract or a lack of further processing beyond the moment, or as you guys are talking about, the opportunity for knowledge, which is stating an empirical fact, but not asking the distinction behind the fact, and thinking beyond it, or thinking um, uh, in wider scopes around the fact of of those questions that maybe we would as adults, where we have a pause. I know when I was a kid, there were opportunities where I would just say, well, this is that, and I may have been right, but I wouldn't ask the questions of why, or I wouldn't step back and think, am I actually stating a fact, or am I regurgitating what I've been told? And maybe I'm wrong in that, but that's kind of what I'm picking up on from you guys in the chat right there. T's talking about swear around a 4-year-old, and they'll understand and will from that moment on use the swear word from that moment onwards in correct context and everything. And Lucia is talking about they're being incredibly intelligent, but just lack communication skills and the ability of, abstract thought, exactly like we're talking about, and emotional control. So, definitely agree with you guys on those topic points. Yeah, and very black and white. Like I know for myself, years and years ago, I wanted to go into ministry, and so I know what you're talking about because when I was a kid, I saw things as there is good, there is bad, there is right, there is wrong, without understanding the existence of how much in life is actually in gray. And I think that's where wisdom comes into play. So, Aiden, do you agree or disagree with something like that?
No, I like when you said that, I was thinking actually, like, I totally can relate to that. I even remember being a little kid, when my parents would watch movies, and I remember forever a question would be like, I would just sit down, like, not having any idea what it's about, and I'd be like, well, is that the bad guy? Like, oh, like who's the good guy? Who's like, it was always good guy and bad. And it was also like a night, like a late '80s, early '90s thing I've recognized. And this is also having to do with like the fiction that was written and the movies that were on, and like even like pro wrestling. Like it was all this like Cold War thing where like they were the bad guys and the Americans were the good guys, and every storyline was like, so it supported that. So everything was good and evil. And I was raised, in a Catholic household, going to Catholic schools, so that extended. It was definitely a lot of that. It was good and evil, and there was like a distinction point somewhere in the middle. And when you clicked over, you went the other way, And even like, yeah, like I totally related to what you said. Like that's how I experienced some childhood. It was good and it was evil, and then when you grow up, like there is a whole lot of gray.
Apologies, guys. I know we've been on this topic for a little bit, but this is, I possibly going to help all of us in our own writings in a way because maybe we haven't thought about this, collectively, and it's really cool to be able to take a pause right here and really ask ourselves the perception and the mentality of children characters because we were, but we are not anymore, and so it becomes kind of a question of what do you knock out of your own brain when writing those characters without neutering the quality of your writing, Because you can't just go, I like fish. That's not a character. Any more questions for our illustrious author, Mr. Aiden over here, and our illustrious server leader? By the way, round of applause for the server.
Oh man, like I will definitely say, with regards to the server, like, cause like like everybody I think goes through it. Like I think we all go down on our writing. I mean, no matter how good the story might be or how many follow or whatever, I think we all reach a point in which there's like a little bit of doubt. Like I actually recently have been, kind of going over the chapters, and like I've been editing, but like part of it has also been like kind of like to maybe tell myself that like, hey, the story's pretty good type of deal. And like during that thought process, I was thinking like, man, like what I nailed though, like you gotta say like no matter like, I missed Rising Stars or whatever, like man, like the server has been awesome. Like that has been completely amazing. And it's mostly the people, like you guys who come here, who hang out every day, and you're just being yourselves, like whether it's like cat pictures or pictures of ham, or you know what I'm saying, or just like commenting, just being yourselves, being your personalities, like joking around, and being there every day. Like you guys are awesome, and I really appreciate it. I really love this like little like hangout spot that we have, and everything we've withstood, despite some of the negativity that we've had to endure. And like, yeah, you guys are awesome. It has very little to do with me. I'm very happy that you guys are there, and like thank you for coming and being a part of it, and thank you for coming to the Gemcast.
Well, I don't see any further questions in our inbox right now that make sense bringing up, and we've had you guys here for a decent amount of time and have enjoyed your engagement. As always, it's an honor to read for you and be able to be a part of your stories. I know I've taken sort of more of a hosting role this time, solely because obviously it's Aiden's story and we want to give him opportunity and space to be responsive toward questions. So thank you guys again. This will be posted to our YouTube channel as always, and we appreciate the time that you've spent with us today, and also the time in general in the server. Please have a wonderful day. And with that, Aiden, are we free to conclude our third episode of Gemcast?
Yeah, this will conclude our third Gemcast live. We will be putting out a poll tomorrow. We're going to try to aim for another one of the different timings to accommodate people from different parts of the globe. So that will go out tomorrow. I imagine like later this evening, Eastern Standard Time. We're going to put out the link to the YouTube channel. And yeah, thank you for coming. Thank you so much for being a part of this. Thank you, Jack, for the wonderful reading. And with that, I will wish you guys a good night and have yourself a wonderful rest of the day.
Goodbye.